welcome everyone to this November talk. Today, it is Vicky's time to explain to us about the design justice. Just a very brief introduction to Vicky, that Vicky is a social entrepreneur and experienced international lawyer and policymaker. She's a fellow of Berkeley College at Yale University, and the Green Market Santa Cruz, which Vicky founded in Trinidad in 2012, was commended by the UNEP as an example of integrated sustainable development in practice. And today, Vicky is going to outline the methodology, so a process approach for intentionally shaping community well-being through the lens of design justice. And over to you, Vicky. The floor is yours to explain more and for us to learn more.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you to the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, a wonderful organization. I'm so glad that I found it. So today I do want to have a conversation with all of you about this concept, a notion of design justice, which, as this first slide shows, is about an intention to co-create well-being. And the picture there, I don't know what it looks like to you, but to me, it looks like some of our complex cities and our complex systems. So let's move on to the next slide. Hi, is Isabel there? Can we move to the next slide? Is it up?
Yeah, it's up. Can you see?
I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing that on the screen. Okay, good, great. So Anna asked me she said, it's always good to start with some questions. And so the first two questions are, what does to design mean? And what does justice mean? So these are common words that you would know. And the only point that I want to make here is that design is both a noun and a verb, and that justice in our current contemporary iteration, all of a sudden it can't stand on its own anymore. All of a sudden there's social justice, there's ecological justice. So what happened to the basic meaning of the term justice? But I'm not going to answer this for you. These are questions that I think you have to answer for yourself as we go forward. I do have a quote down at the bottom, which goes directly to this point, which is, the saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. And that was Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer. I'm going to move to the next slide. Now there you will see something that to me looked very much like the picture in the first slide. But this is just a basic dandelion spore. And I put it here because I think that as we think about design and design justice, we do have to think about nature. We have to think about the natural ecosystems that support our life. And the designs that are in nature are very intricate and they're very delicate. And this is something that I think is very important for us to remember. So now let's go to the next slide, which is the real question that I want to ask. So well-being, everybody, I want well-being. I think everybody on this call wants well-being, for our world. So who is against well-being? I really don't have answers to this question. I wish people would put some answers in the chat. I asked several of my friends, and I came out with a few things that may help us, because if we are trying to design an economy that puts people and planet first and has the economy in service, the wealth in service of what we consider well-being, who could be against that? But actually, the first person I talked to was a skeptic. And well-being, well, you know, people are responsible for that themselves. They have their own personal agency. And so well-being becomes an individual state for individual people. And I don't think that well-being can be that. So maybe those are some of the people that we have to think of when we are trying to go forward with our agenda. Then you have the measurist, and they say that, well, well-being is too squishy. We can't figure out what it is. We can't get it into our statistical models. So we have that also fighting against us, even though there's great work going on trying to create new metrics. Then you have the reductionist, and they just focus on, well, if people really need something or they want something, they'll pay money for it, and we can reduce well-being to what people will pay money for. And that makes it very easy. And they fall right in with the economist, or the traditional economist, I should say, who really have looked at well-being as something that is too much of an extra to be measured. So I think this is an important question as we think about designing justice itself. I think we need to understand, I didn't want to use the word enemies, but who are our antagonists? Where are the obstacles to our going forward? The next slide is the 3 C's. Now, this is an important slide for me. When I spoke earlier on about Isaac Asimov's quote, that science goes faster than human wisdom, it's very important for those of us in this space who are trying to change the world, I'll put in quotes, towards something better and fairer, that we have a certain consciousness of who we are as biological animals on this planet. And I was speaking with Isabel and Anna just before we came on and asking them if they had seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And in that documentary, one of the speakers says that computer processing power has increased 1 trillion-fold. I can't even imagine that, but I do remember when I first started out in my career, I was at the US Department of Commerce and working with TRW, and out in California, there would be warehouses of computers. A computer was as big as a 80-ton truck. I mean, there were no small things. They were huge. And they said, the same speaker said, but cars can now, from 1960, can only go twice as fast, or maybe 2.5 times as fast. But humans, we're not going any faster than we were in 1960. Our brains are pretty much still the same. And I think that this is one of the most important things that we have to think about in designing, because I think, and I'm positing this for discussion, that there is something which is a human scale. This doesn't deal with human imagination or genius. It deals with the scale where we can actually build reciprocal relationships of trust. And those reciprocal relationships of trust and camaraderie and ease are the things that are required to get to a well-being economy. And so this issue of consciousness and human consciousness, the neuroscientists may be able to help us, but we have to think about that. And I'll get to this again a little bit later. The next C is clarity, because without clarity, we cannot move forward. The clarity is very important to the next C, which is the collective action. In our world of today, especially with over 52% of us living in urban agglomerations, we have to work together. This is an imperative that we have. And in order to work together, we have to be on the same page. We have to start seeing the problems that we want to solve in the same way. And I think that there are a couple of things that in terms of clarity are very important. One is that we live in a world of abundance and not a world of scarcity. And I want the economist, Catherine, and others to really focus us on this again, because scarcity is an economic concept which was introduced in order to develop the economic models we have. How can we develop this consciousness of the abundance that actually exists? Right now, today, I was on another call. There's $476 trillion worth of money just floating around in the system, pension funds, banks, and so on. Can we use this stranded money to deal with some of the real problems of people who do not have basic needs? Because right now it's not doing anything. And most of it is not even able to gain any interest because we're at below zero interest rates. So those are my 3 C's. And now I get to the meat of design justice, and which is, and this is the real sole point, if you take away nothing else, it is that the process is the product. So what process you have is going to give you a product, and it is going to be ongoing. It is not really going to stop. You build a building and you think, well, the building is finished and it stops. And we have learned that no, it may reach a useful life, which is tied to its money value, but after it's no longer in use, it will be reused and parts of it will be reused and so on. So the process is the product. So I love puns. So I was writing ideas, really. I was writing ideas down as the first point here, but it sounded like ID ears because I wanted to make the first point that in process legitimacy, the most important thing is to listen. And people say this, it might be a little hackneyed, it might be a little cliched, but we live in this big global world and we are all using English. Many of us are not native English speakers. And so we use the same words, but they mean different things. And so in listening out for people's ideas, we have to hear what they're saying and we have to repeat it back to them. And then we have to synthesize it. This is a little bit of a slow process, but if we keep it in mind, we don't jump to conclusions, we don't judge, and we don't stereotype. The second element in process legitimacy is, which is design justice. I'm just telling you the process that we're going to use to design justice. So is that we have to identify our stakeholders. And I'm happy that the Business Roundtable has come to this understanding as well, that it is not only shareholders, but it is every stakeholder, workers, the earth itself, the earth's ecosystems, consumers, buyers, people who are watching on. So we have a huge number of stakeholders in any design process. And we have to ask ourselves, is everybody who is affected by this design? If we want to build a playground, if we want to put up a farmer's market, if we want to create a mall, whatever it is, we have to ask ourselves, is everybody who will be affected included in the discussion? And again, the process of identifying the stakeholders is the process of building trust, because when you go out and ask someone, we are planning to do this, we think this is a good idea, what do you think? Immediately, that opens up a space for trust. It doesn't create the trust, but it opens a space for trust and for collaborations and for the building of coalitions and the space to have the advocacy discussions about what parts are good, what parts are bad, what parts can't work, what parts may be too costly. So this is important. And as I said, design thinking is a field of its own. These are the other elements in thinking about design. So you come up with a model, you come up with a prototype, you come up with a map, and then you start to make some toolkits, because then you have to actually build something. And we are talking about building when we talk about designing justice, designing a just system, a just economic system, a just community system that creates this well-being. It's a moving thing. It's not something that is fixed, and that's why the emphasis is on the word process and also on designing as a verb. And then you test, you experiment at a small scale. Again, I'm going to re-emphasize that the experiments that we need to happen at a human scale, I think. And I am just putting that in quotes because I don't know yet what really human scale is. I know that I can walk a certain distance. Obviously, if I get in an airplane, I can go a different distance, but that is not human. That's already augmented by technology. So what is really at the human scale that I can handle because of my biology? And finally, of course, there's evaluating your process by looking back at it, talking to people about how things are working, monitoring it, and then tweaking these things to try to make them better. And here we really are in this process legitimacy, talking about community building, because we have to build communities to get to our next slide, which is the most important slide, of course. And this is where we're talking about our basic human needs. And you know, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, talked about that as well. We have many frameworks which talk about these basic human needs, but how do you design a city or a town where everybody has these basic human needs and has easy access to these kinds of things? Now, you will note I'm laughing about this slide because in preparing for this talk, clean air, we have no problems. Clean water, food, we don't have too many problems about that. Shelter, a little bit more. Clothing, a little bit more. And then, of course, for me, utilities have become a basic human need. Now, you could say education and health are basic human needs, but today, in the world of today, 2020, with COVID, we know that without these utilities, we are going to have a difficult time either having access to healthcare, having access to education, and being able to do what we're doing now, which is talking to each other across the globe. So for me, the digital utility has become a part of basic human needs. And we have to think about that with the 476 trillion that's out there stranded, how we get not only water systems to people, but how we get them systems where they can access information and knowledge that can help them create their own well-being. So now we're going to move on to what's old is new. I was very, very excited to find these two books. The first book, the one on the left, was written by Sir Ebenezer Howard in 1898, and it's called Garden Cities of Tomorrow. He was talking more about London than anything else, but and the one on the right is a very recent book by Andres Duany, who is writing about agrarian urbanism and the importance of having food systems and water systems near to where people are living. And you notice that both of them are talking about cities, as am I. And I'm going to move to this next slide quickly because the slide on the left is Sir Ebenezer Howard's 1898 slide about the advantages of living in the town. And then he does the advantages of living in the country. And then he tries to do a matrix where he says, how can you combine the best of both worlds? And what was very interesting to me, thinking this man was writing 120 years ago, the cities, we didn't have cities of the size and scale that we do today. he was saying that there's in the town, you have to go a long distance to get to work. You have brigades of people who are unemployed, but you have lights. And then if you go to the country, you have fresh air, and but you have low wages, you don't have good utilities. And one, perhaps for me, the most interesting thing is he says that in the country, there's no public spirit. And this is contrasted with the attractions of the city, the entertainment that's in the city that brings people together. So you will see now on the right, this is Andres Duani's example of agrarian urbanism. And for me, the visuals are extremely powerful. This visual is so much like the one I started the talk with. It's so much like the roundness of that dandelion spore. And it suggests that for Sir Ebenezer Howard, the right size was 30,000 people. He said that would be a good size. He wasn't saying you have to stay within that spot, but within that space, you should be able to get everything you need, the culture, your religion, if you have one, food, water, fresh air, and so on. So this is how he thought about it. And then this is how Andres Duani is thinking about it today. And I find this wonderful. I think that this is where we have to go. And then next slide, please, Isabel. So I just had to throw it in there because look at this Doughnut Economics slide compared with Sir Ebenezer's slide and Andres Duani's slide. And it talks about exactly the same things, except for, as we all know, that hole in the middle is the billion people that don't have access to the things in the green circle, which are the basic human needs. And then those red triangles out there are if we try to design our new systems to provide the people in the donut hole, we will exceed the planet's capacity. And this is why, once again, I think that designing at the human scale is where we will find justice, because the justice, the inclusiveness, the fairness that we think of when we think of justice will be able to be achieved in a process that we can actually handle. I don't know how well we can handle millions of people. It's very hard, individually, that is. Now I'm going to come to two examples. This one is the Design Brigade. It is the Center for Collaborative Arts and Media at Yale. And because of COVID, there couldn't be the internships that there usually are. And so the students, these students at this elite Ivy League school, were then offered an opportunity to come and design for the inner city of New Haven. So already you have a kind of a clash of cultures. And they were told that the community was their framework for design, which turned their learning and knowledge on its head, because usually if you're designing something, you get a brief and you have somebody who's paying for it and they tell you what they want, and you come back with a design, they tweak the design, you make it, and they pay you and it's over. But in this case, these students had to go and actually spend time talking to people with whom they would normally not have ever had a conversation. What they learned, I'm distilling this, I left the link down at the bottom. What they learned was that you have to design with and not for, which goes back to the points about process design. They learned that research and discovery in the communities is the bulk of the work that they are doing, and perhaps not an actual design. They understood that the time that they actually spent doing that research, listening to those people, understanding what they want, gave the process legitimacy. And then I just asked the question, does the design reproduce structural inequality and exclusion? Let me tell you what they came up with, because it's so wonderful in this time of COVID. after their conversations, this was a 10-week internship, after their conversations, the first project was a healing space because so many people had died from COVID and complications of COVID that people needed some kind of a space in which they could process what had happened and a space that was used for healing. So that was their first design idea. The second one, of course, was also equally important. They noticed that the older people, the elderly in all of these communities had become increasingly estranged from their families and friends because of the health restrictions. And so their brief to themselves after this consultation was to create spaces that would respect the health concerns and the precautions and still allow people to visit their elderly friends and relatives. And the third project they came up was using the cultural institutions of Yale New Haven and designing digitally so that many of that kind of knowledge, those kinds of experiences would be more easily accessible to the community. And I just think that this was really brilliant. And I think that it proves the point about process legitimacy and how you get to a certain kind of justice. I'm going to close with the next slide, please. With the Green Market, which is the organization that I founded. And I'm showing you a picture actually of the Green Market. We kept all of the trees, and this is a part of the Northern Range in Trinidad. And as you can't actually see all those layers of the forest, but all those layers of the forest support different kinds of biodiversity. And they also serve as a metaphor for the fact, for clarity. I mean, there's certain things that you can see when you're on the forest floor, and there's certain things that you can't see. And there are things that you can see in terms of where you want to go in terms of design and justice when you're up in the canopy and you're in the overstory. And then the last slide, this is exactly the same spot. You just were seeing the top, and this is what it looks like when people are in the market itself. The market was designed, as I said, thinking about the Sustainable Development Goal number 12, which is changing patterns of consumption and production. So essentially, we wanted to have a way of cutting out a lot of the middle people who increase the prices for consumers and lessen the prices for farmers and small artisans. And we spent a good bit of time in 2011 before the market was launched in doing exactly what the Design Brigade at Yale had done and exactly what Sir Ebenezer Howard had done. And so I really do think that we managed to create a set of stakeholders and to reach out to a set of stakeholders that now are anchors for building this kind of community wealth. And this is, I think, what I want to say. I would just now like to thank you for spending this time with me, for listening, and I would be happy to answer any questions. The last slide.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vicki. That was really wonderful. There were a lot of questions I think that you raised, like who is against well-being, or the issue is to design with and not for. So I would really like for people to be able to ask questions, because as you know, the WEAll talks, it's all about discussions, so that you have the opportunity to ask Vicki directly or to discuss all these issues together. If you want, you can just raise your hands and
somebody, yeah. Are you going to call on them?
Okay. Thank you very much for this interesting story. just about a picture you showed us of the ideal city. They remember me that the city of Amsterdam and Leiden have a similar design, but the outside green area is now built. So it was exactly as designed like a canal around the center. So that was just my remark. But can you tell a bit more about the type of market is inside? Is it from the region, products from the region? Is it a food market or more than that?
Hi, Jan. If you're talking about the green market, it is in a suburban space, a peri-urban space, I would say. And around it, it's not only food, it's food processes, we have entertainment, we have talks that are ongoing. We do all kinds of things. We've even had plays. We do many different things, but they focus in the context of where we are, and that's very important. I'm sorry that they built around you, and it reminds me of the point of redesign, that a lot of our design justice work is going to have to happen within things that are already designed. And this is a challenge because we're going to have to take some of those things down in order to put some green spaces back up and to make them more human scale.
So it's a meeting place and a cultural place. It's all together. Thank you very much. Interesting.
Thank you, Jan.
I see Amanda.
Amanda, you go next. And then we have Matthew and Robert.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I really, really appreciated and enjoyed that. One of the things you said early on is, we need to sort of switch our mindset from a scarcity mindset to one of abundance, right? And that definitely resonates with me a lot working in economic policy. It's so often, you need more investment, you need more technology, you need more skills, you need these external things to come into a space as the drivers for your economic development, right? As opposed to beginning with the resources and strengths and what's already there in place as being the driver for that growth. I was just curious if you've come across any really good tools or, literature or things like that. I know there's like the asset-based kind of development work that's been sort of trying to emerge to sort of challenge that deficit perspective. But any other kind of materials or thinkers or things that you found particularly inspiring?
Amanda, I'm not an economist, much to my dismay. So I really have not, I really don't have those kind of resources to give you. I have been asking economists for that, that I know, and it's very, very frustrating. This is all I can say. I came across one notion of social credit, which is, I don't know if you know about that. It's also around the same time as Sir Ebenezer Howard. And it talks about this commons where the land belongs to the people, at least a percentage of its productivity. And to me, that's an interesting notion, because then you get to the basic human needs without the basic universal income. You start to monetize the land itself where people are living and impute a value to that land.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amanda and Vicki. Matthew?
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much, Vicki. That was a great presentation, and there was a lot that came out for me as well. The point on abundance that Amanda just made, and reflecting on, in fact, for a lot of agriculture right now, the issue is surplus rather than scarcity. That's really destroying communities. And then the relationship between well-being and trust, which you were pointing out is really intriguing to explore further, and how that relates to how people conceive of human nature. But the question I had really was following your point about when you're thinking about scale, and you alluded to this in your comment around getting to like millions of people, right? And I'm sure you're asked this a lot because the questions always come up around scale and pace and doing things quickly in a big way. And that's kind of the moment that I feel like we're all presented with. And I just was curious to know what your current thinking is now around those types of questions of how to do things quickly and in a big way for many people, you know, while still being mindful of process and the need to work from the bottom up. Just wondering what your thoughts are on those sort of tensions, especially when we're presented like with Green New Deal proposals or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, so much. What, you know, really a thoughtful question. The issue of scale is what we can do ourselves, unaided by technology. That's really, in a way, what I'm talking about in terms of scale. Because, for example, if we take a Green New Deal, well, let me backtrack. Let me get to your issue about trust, because your question was a complicated one. I can't have a process of trust at all at a distance. This is where I am now. I may be wrong about this, but it's gonna be, I mean, I'm trusting all of you guys right now, and you are at a distance, and so this is good. And we're in the context of the Well-Being Economy Alliance. So I think we feel free to talk to each other like this, and that is good. But in terms of trying to move policy out to people who are not in a space where we are all interested here in well-being, to move that Green New Deal out into a space of 300 million Americans, I think can only happen like community by community. Each community has to deal with its geography and deal with what it can do to get to that place. And then hopefully the nodes themselves will be concentric, and they'll start to touch each other like big gears. And that way we can get to the growth that we're talking about, but it will be based on something that I think is smaller. But, you know, I don't have the answers really to this question. It's a complex question, and I've been thinking about it a lot because I've worked in development for a long, long time. And you can do many things, and Vandana Shiva will talk about this. You can make many things happen, but they're not sustainable. That's what happens. So I can go to a place, I can build a building, or I can tell people, you know, you should grow things like this, and, you know, 2 years down the road, they won't have any soil left, or, you know, the dam will have broken, and, you know, things just won't work anymore. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, you wanted to come in?
Hello, everybody. I'm Vicki. I really loved this presentation. It just ties in so much with a lot of the things I'm currently looking into. And I guess just yesterday I was looking at the WEAll tree with the narratives and our knowledge at the bottom, and then there's the economic systems change at the top. And then as I'm listening to you now, it's just looking like design justice is that in between space between how we have these great ideas and how they move and then they become alive within communities. And so I guess it's just lovely to have come across design justice from other places, but then just to hear it within this particular space and just to bring it alive in that particular way. So thank you so much for that. And I guess I don't know if this is gonna come off as a question or as a comment, but I'll just put it forward. Was that the thing that you said about experimenting at small scale. And this thing about, sometimes say we have great ideas, but they're happening at such a small scale. And so what makes me interested about WEAll as a community is about people doing small things together, and those small things then now in common being a big force, as a collective force. And so, yeah, I guess it's just a comment about how I'm really seeing this idea of design justice being something that's so much a part of what we're all trying to do. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Robert, for that nice comment. It brings me back to the part of Matthew's question that I didn't answer, which was about the speed. And I wanted to say, there's another documentary, it's in French, it's called L'urgence de ralentir, the urgency of slowing down. And it's, the ruthless elimination of hurry. We are in a hurry to go where? Why are we what is the hurry? Why do we have to go faster? We need to design to use less. I saw the other day on television, I was on a PBS documentary of someplace in Bangladesh where they had a jeans factory. Okay, and because of COVID, there were boxes and boxes of blue jeans piled to the ceiling. Now, the ladies who were making these blue jeans were living in a 6x6 space with about 20 other people. And so they've lost their jobs. But why were we making 20? How many pairs of jeans do you have? I mean, I don't like jeans, so I don't even have one pair. But most people have too many pairs. And what is this use for consumption? And see, that's the thing. We are in a system, and this is a system we have to dismantle because it's an extractive and exploitative system. We have to dismantle that system as we are building this new system. You see, and I think it's so helpful when we see these things, because it tells us about where the money is. If we want to use money as a medium and money as a value to help us understand what people's labor and the materials are about, this is a big chunk of stuff that we didn't need.
Thank you, Vicki. Catherine, you wanted also to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Vicki. It's been such an interesting conversation, and it has just sparked so many ideas in my mind. And so they're not particularly questions, they're just sort of reflections and sort of suggestions for areas that might resonate with you, that your remarks have inspired in me. I mean, partly your comments at the beginning about scarcity just really reminded me how much our GDP orientation enforces that, in that it's really a measure of how marketized our economy is. And if we're incentivized to increase GDP, that's effectively saying we need to marketize more and more aspects of life, which creates an enclosure and imagines scarcity because of the price system and so on. So I think that just, I see that idea reinforced in the beyond GDP conversations. I think also there's something really profound about this idea of design justice in terms of community participation, participatory budgeting, all those discussions where so often governments particularly open up a consultation, but it's questions of the detail rather than the agenda in and of itself. So it's almost, you can choose to have blue doors or red doors, but you cannot have any say whether the shopping centre goes up in the first place. And I think that I've never heard the phrase design justice before, but I find it really profound in tipping the balance of power in terms of agenda setting. So thank you for that. I also wondered how useful you find the idea of bioregions in terms of answering your question around what is human scale, and also whether your ideas resonate with this idea of the 15 or 20-minute neighborhood that's quite trendy at the moment, it seems. And it just seeing those designs that you put up there reminded me of Oscar Niemeyer's design for Brasilia, and I just wondered how much that, and of course that hasn't worked. I mean, his vision for Brasilia hasn't, it's the designs there, but people, because I think perhaps of cars, have used their city in a different way. So I'd be curious to hear how that, whether that's reflections. And I want to add another dead dude to your list of folks that, just shows the long roots of these conversations. And that's a Scottish guy called Sir Patrick Geddes. And I was asked to do a memorial lecture for him earlier this year. So I'd never heard of him before, but he's almost the patron saint of the planning community, the city and town planning community. And so it gave me the excuse to dig into his work, and my gosh, he was ahead of his time. I mean, he absolutely would be a part of the wellbeing economy movement now. So it seems like you know his work. So I'll shut up there. And of course, Eleanor Ostrom's stuff around the sort of, when you're talking about nodes being, concentric circles, I mean, it just reminded me of her idea of polycentricity. So thank you for that. I love talks when it just sparks all these ideas and connections across the work I do. So thank you, Vicki, you're just brilliant.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Your work is also extremely inspirational. I'll just be brief. Bioregions for me are everything, because geography is everything. And it informs much more than we imagine. I mean, if you're Buddhist, and they all, even the Dalai Lama says he doesn't think Buddhism could have developed in sub-Saharan Africa because it's just too hot and you have to be cold and up in the Himalayas. But geography does inform, and this brings us to the nation state, which of course I find to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks since I was in law school many, many decades ago. It's not appropriate for a globalized world. It's not a governance structure that works. COVID has proved that time and time again. But it hasn't worked for other things either. We've had financial crises, we've had all kind of other crises based on the nation state as the ultimate governance principle for us. And Geddes, I have to laugh, Geddes Grant is one of the biggest companies in the Caribbean too. Geddes Grant, yeah. So yes, there were a lot of people who came into that region from Scotland. But your points are great points. And Brasilia, I went to Brasilia, and it's funny because it's like a dead city. As is I'm not gonna say the name of the city in Nigeria. Oh my gosh. Well, they built a new city too, to remove from Rio and to remove from Lagos. They put these cities in the middle of the country, and the only people who really would go there are the bureaucrats for meetings. So they didn't ever really talk to anybody before they had these brilliant ideas. And the development banks, as you would know, they're right behind them financing many of these white elephant ideas.
Elaine, you also had a point or a question?
Hi, actually, thank you very much, Anna. This has been amazing. Vicki, I know that your talks are always interesting and edifying, and I was so happy that I was able to finish my class quickly so I could join. I missed a little bit, but it was great. But the first thing you talked about, the ideas and the ideas, that's where I jumped in. I thought it was brilliant because one of the students I was just meeting with prior, her name is Sadie, and it's ideas backwards. Her mother named her SAEDI because of ideas. So I just thought it was like, oh, this is interplanetary collusion. So that's just one thing. But I want to add that this has been a tremendous lightening in my day. A lot of work, this gives so much hope that this type of work is being done. But one good thing is here in Trinidad, very recently, 2 days ago, there was a call from the public, I heard it on the news, calling for a green market in Port of Spain. Yep. So I immediately thought of you, and I thought this is a ray of light because it's something that the WEAll is sort of getting into that now. And now you're getting something from the public suggesting that. And I can only say that is deep penetration into this area. And I would be so happy if this could actually happen. This is a great movement, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's my good friend.
That's wonderful. We still have a few minutes. I know we could keep going for much longer, but do you have any other questions, reflections on Vicki's point? I noticed there was some interesting conversation in the chat around if people are actually against well-being or if we are ignorant of well-being. And Wendy and Edward had some very interesting points about what we actually learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like UBI, it is just an example of a policy and a starting point of discussion around that. So I don't know if Edward or Wendy, if you would like to come in on that.
Hi, Anna. Hi, Vicki. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a chartered civil engineer and have ran my own business and incorporated, if you like, sort of the thought process of well-being into my business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a number of roles right now, and one of them is lecturing at business school, and fabulous students learning fabulous things and delivering. And it's very clear in the different classes, and the one is on strategy. They are given the focus to concentrate on listed companies because they have access to their full accounts, etc., etc. And it's very disappointing listening to fabulous presentations that are basing strategy around simply money. And the other class, which is megatrends, so they give fantastic presentations, and pretty much every group out of the 20 groups that I had to listen to the presentations on all covered universal basic income is pretty much a necessary lever in the transition between how to understand where your labour resources are going. The strategy one basically said that their strategy was, for one company, was to remove the labour resources from India, set up an alternative in Vietnam because they can source it lower. So I am in a difficult position because I'm not meant to lead overly. I'm not the academic. I am there for a different way. So having information to cite would be really useful for me, because that's the point where I can go in and actually refer to other sources. So I then went down the route of trying to go, but where would that go as a strategy? If you go to Vietnam, where do you go after Vietnam, and what do you do? And they went, well, we'll use the profits in Vietnam to raise the R&D in India. I says, what about using the profits in Vietnam to support the fact that they could then develop, new R&D products? So that's the sort of information. If there's things like that that are readily available, it would be fabulous for me to be able to share. I mean, it's a bit late, it's end of semester 2 now, and this is my first semester, so I've been on a learning curve as well. But what you're talking about is the sort of information that they need to be seeing. They need to see those tangible facts to be able to, for me to share them more readily, because they're still being marked on a curriculum that still requires them to provide a certain amount of information. Sorry, that was a very long-winded, hope that made sense.
It makes so much sense. And, I am a lawyer. I went to these schools, and I am telling you that there's just unlearning to be done. And I just don't know. My focus is really a lot on food systems. And with COVID, the long supply chains, Matthew made the point. I mean, how sad to watch people throwing away food. We produce in the world today, we produce food for 12 billion people. We are 8 billion people, 12 billion people, and we waste 40 to 45% of the food that we produce. And you want to tell me that this is an efficient system because you build that waste into a system. This is not an efficient system. But you see, global capital it's almost like it's caught in its own dream. It's caught in its matrix, and it's very difficult for us to get outside of that matrix. I noticed, I think you put the B Corps inside. That is helpful. But you see, what is really helpful is redundancy. You see, the big companies, they don't want the redundancy. Amazon wants just-in-time delivery, and we produce just in time, so we don't have the jeans problem sitting there. Of course, the jeans problem wouldn't be there if there weren't COVID. But systems that are going to be robust, resilient, and sustainable will have redundancy built into them. Because otherwise, when there's a flood or a catastrophe, you won't have anything. So I don't know, Wendy, where you're going to get that information, because that is not information that is available to our global systems. And if you're teaching in a business school, it's just your students will push you, but you're not going to, even Ben and Jerry's, that was our great happiness about B Corps, right? I believe they sold out because at a certain point in time, you know, the founders get tired and they sell out into the system.
I think that's a really good point you made there. And I think that's something I can use, that I can focus on in my own experience. And it's about your exit. And it's about exiting things. And I am actually setting up at the moment a community interest company with the local development trust, or we're certainly at the very early stages of planning for that. So perhaps I just need to create my own case studies and share that and hope that at least the majority of them are not against it. They understand and they see it, but they are still being driven by the mainstream noise that comes towards them. So it's just that's useful. That word itself, just figuring out the exit and making them perhaps get to that same point of when will it end, you know. So thank you.
That's wonderful. I think we can close with that phrase, that there is unlearning to be done, which I think summarized wonderfully. So Vicki, people are asking how they can reach out to you if like.
I'll put my email in the chat. I can do that, and you can reach out to me. I mean, through, as I was telling people, I'm stuck here in New York, so I'm not in Trinidad, and it is a little bit difficult, but you know, you can reach out to me, and I think that WEAll, I think it means that your work is really cut out for you. I know there's Slack, there's a platform that's there. But as Wendy said, all of us are looking for the case studies. I mean, I was looking for a case study after Rio +20, and that's why I created the Green Market, because I wanted to try to understand, you know, how this could work.
That's wonderful. And indeed, use our Slack channels to share all the ideas, case studies that you have, so that we would love to learn more and to amplify those. It was so wonderful to see you all today, and thank you so much for your time. Vicki, thank you so much for this incredible talk. It was lovely to have you here. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining this call today.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.